Russia is a gigantic country. It's the biggest in the world, in fact. But how did it get so big? How do you take a collection of disparate tribes and turn them into a sprawling, multi-time zone empire? Well, let's find out. The origins of modern Russia can be found in the region of European Russia, the smaller western portion of the country separated from Siberia by the Ural Mountains. This section of the country was defined by the many great rivers that ran through it, including the Volga, Don, and Dnieper. Now, the area had already been populated by humans for thousands of years. And various nomadic tribes lived here when the first large-scale states began to appear in the region in the 9th and 10th centuries. Now, those people weren't exactly building empires yet, though. At this point, the area was occupied by a number of different peoples, primarily Slavic, Finnic, and Baltic tribes, many of whom were still living in a tribal fashion. Although some larger states existed in the surrounding areas, such as the Khazars to the east and the First Bulgarian Empire to the south, most of the region was still divided amongst hundreds of semi-independent principalities. As the 9th century rolled on, though, the area would start to see the arrival of a new people. They came from Scandinavia, and they were known as the Vikings, although they were called Varangians when they were in the eastern Mediterranean. See, there was nothing unusual about Vikings sailing west to attack monasteries and coastal towns. That's what we think of when we hear the word Viking. But these guys actually explored and traded all over, including the Byzantine Empire and even North Africa. And as they ventured down the Volga, Don, and Dnieper rivers, they noticed that there was a lot of money to be made by protecting river traffic from bandits and, occasionally sacking the cities themselves. So they set up shop and started to conquer. In fact, by the 10th century, many of the small settlements founded by the Vikings, like Kiev, and Smolensk, became the centers of new states that incorporated Slavic and other local populations, forming a loose federation known as the Kievan Rus. The name Rus comes from the Old Norse word for rower, which makes sense considering that these guys made their living by controlling river traffic. The Kievan Rus wasn't like your typical medieval state. It was basically a Viking trading company masquerading as a monarchy, but it was also an incredibly diverse place. As the Kievan Rus expanded, it incorporated peoples from all across Eastern Europe, including Scandinavians, Slavs, Finns, Balts, and even Byzantines. Then, in the 12th century, everything stopped being awesome. See, in 1223, the Mongols showed up and smashed the Kievan Rus at the Battle of the Kalka River. Then in 1238, Beta Khan's hordes descended on the Kievan Rus and sacked Kiev. Soon after, the rest of the Rus principalities were also conquered and made into tributaries of the Mongol Empire. Only Novgorod and a few others managed to avoid direct conquest and maintain a degree of independence by paying tribute to the Mongols. For the next 200 years, the Rus would exist as a collection of minor states controlled by the Mongols, who ruled the region from their capital in Crimea, which they named the Golden Horde. It was bad. So now the stage was set for Russia's greatest hero, Ivan the Terrible, except he wasn't called that yet. He was just Ivan Vasilievich, the third prince of Moscow. You see, while the Mongols had crushed the Kievan Rus, they never really controlled Moscow. And as the power of the Golden Horde waned in the 14th and 15th centuries, Moscow became a major player in the region. By 1461, Ivan's father, Vasily II, had secured Moscow's independence from the Golden Horde, and soon after, Ivan became Grand Prince of Moscow. Now, you might remember him from our episode on the origin of Halloween, where he murdered his son in a fit of rage. But before that, he was pretty cool. After consolidating his power in Moscow, Ivan turned his attention to expanding the territory. He led campaigns against the remnants of the Golden Horde, taking the city of Kazan in 1552 and bringing the region known as the Volga Bulgaria under Russian control. Ivan also annexed the independent trading city of Novgorod in 1477, breaking its ties with the declining Hanseatic League and incorporating it into the Russian state. This was a huge deal because it brought most of northern Russia under Moscow's control. Ivan the Terrible went on to launch further campaigns against the Crimean Khanate, which was still nominally a part of the Mongol Empire. His efforts helped limit the Ottoman southward push and gain Russia access to the Caspian Sea. But Ivan's desire for power didn't stop at Russia's borders. He wanted to bring Russia into the lucrative trade with Asia, and the only way to do that was to find a sea route to the Pacific. You see, the established trade routes to Asia went through the Middle East, and everyone had to pay the Muslims a hefty tariff to use them. But as we discussed in our episode on Portugal, Prince Henry the Navigator was obsessed with finding another way. And in 1492, Christopher Columbus stumbled into the Americas. Now, the Russians knew that something big was going on, because the Venetians, who normally supplied Russia with all of its fancy goods, were suddenly out of stock. So in 1494, the Russian princes sent an expedition east to find the fabled riches of Cathay. And they did. But by the time they got back to Russia with their sacks of Chinese silk and porcelain, they learned that the Italian merchants had filled the void left by the Chinese, and the Russian nobles were no longer interested in buying expensive trinkets from Asia. But the sailors were like, "Yo, we sailed all the way to the Pacific. Let's go again." And the princes were like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And so the Russian exploration of the Pacific began. The first Russian to sail all the way to Japan was the aforementioned Ermak Timofeyevich, a Cossack chieftain who made the journey in 1698. But the real pioneer of Russian exploration in the Pacific was Vitus Bering, a Danish explorer in the service of the Russian Empire who discovered Alaska in 1741. In 1721, Peter the Great seized the former Swedish province of Ingria, which included the city of St. Petersburg. There he built his new capital, modeled after Paris and Venice, complete with canals and palaces. With the completion of the canal between the Neva and the Volga rivers, St. Petersburg became Russia's window to the west. It replaced Moscow as Russia's de facto capital and became the seat of Russia as cultural and intellectual life. Peter the Great's accomplishments were enormous. He reformed the military, modernized the government, reformed the legal system, reformed the economy, and raised Russia from a backward, superstitious society to a progressive European power. Peter was basically the Russian Napoleon. He wanted to transform Russia into a major Mediterranean power, and he set about doing that by starting a war with Sweden, which resulted in the Great Northern War. With the help of the Danes, Saxons, and Poles, Peter defeated the Swedes and acquired Estonia, Livonia, and southeast Finland. In 1721, he was crowned the first emperor of all Russia. Throughout the 18th century, Russia grew steadily. Catherine the Great added Poland, Crimea, Belarus, and the Caucasus to the empire, while Alexander I added Finland and Bessarabia, a region between the Black and Caspian Seas, under Nicholas I. The Russians pushed into Central Asia and the Caucasus, clashing repeatedly with the Ottomans. The result was a massive territorial gain for Russia after the Russo-Turkish War of 1877-78, as well as the weakening of the Ottoman Empire. Russia's steady growth continued into the 20th century. After defeating Napoleon, Alexander I took steps to improve the Russian economy and promote education. His brother, Nicholas I, was forced into a series of repressive policies to maintain stability following a series of failed rebellions. But the ultimate result was the rise of the revolutionary movement. After the abdication of Nicholas II and the collapse of the Russian monarchy, the country became the world's first communist state, the Soviet Union, which then evolved into the biggest superpower of the 20th century. So there you have it, the story of how Russia went from a collection of small, disjointed principalities to one of the world's largest empires. What's next? Oh, you want me to keep talking about Russia? Okay, click this other video right over here. It's about Stalin's secret genocide of the Ukrainian people. Everyone loves that one. Or click this other video over here. You know what? Why not? Just click both of them. Come on, come on, come on. Do it, do it, do it.